night sky over Denver glowed with the faint shimmer of red and blue lights, yet there were no sirens. A quiet storm was brewing. In the shadows of ordinary suburbs, men and women in plain clothes tracked delivery vans, logged license plates, and filmed the rhythm of nightly drop-offs. No badges, no weapons, just cameras, notebooks, and determination. What made ordinary citizens turn into silent hunters against one of the world's most violent cartels. It began in the Front Range. 2 drug labs went dark within 48 hours. Then came the tip that sparked everything coded messages, pink cocaine, and delivery routes traced through Aurora's industrial corridors. By the time law enforcement arrived, cocaine dust coated the floor safes were open, and the cartel's cleanup crews had already fled. But something had shifted. Colorado's communities were no longer waiting for help. They had become part of the war machine. The DEA's September 2025 report confirmed what locals already knew. A total of 670 arrests, $77,000 kilos seized, and over $48 million in cash and assets. The Jalisco New Generation Cartel CJNG had been hit harder than at any time in U.S. history. President Trump, in a televised statement, declared CJNG a foreign terrorist organization, invoking new authorities that linked narcotics, terror finance, and organized crime under one policy umbrella. Strategically, this reclassification did more than open new doors. It kicked them down. Federal intelligence agencies began sharing real-time surveillance data with local police, a coordination framework not seen since post-9/11 counterterrorism operations. Colorado's vigilante reports, once dismissed as neighborhood gossip, were now filtered through Homeland Security fusion centers. The citizen-to-federal model blurred the line between local vigilance and national security enforcement. Globally, parallels emerged. Just as Ukraine's drone networks rely on civilian spotters to identify Russian armor, Colorado's residents became digital sensors in America's domestic war. In the Middle East, Israel's counterintelligence architecture has long fused community observation with state defense. The same logic now applied to U.S. soil, even in the Indo-Pacific, where tensions with China over fentanyl precursors and dual-use chemicals grow. Washington's new approach signaled something larger, a war not just on drugs, but on influence. And yet, beneath the victories, the moral question lingers. When citizens become informants in a nation built on privacy and freedom, how much surveillance is too much? How close can a democracy come to its own reflection in the mirror of control before it loses what it's defending? When dawn broke across the Rockies, federal convoys rolled out in silence. No warning, no leaks, just coordinates flowing in from across the state, addresses, plate numbers, delivery timestamps, fed by civilians who had watched and waited for months. It was the start of Operation Hammer Veil, the DEA's 5-day strike against the Jalisco New Generation Cartel's U.S. logistics web. Across 23 field divisions, raids erupted almost simultaneously. In Denver, a pill press warehouse was cleared by 5:40 a.m. In Phoenix, a CJNG courier ring collapsed before sunrise. By day's end, over 1 million counterfeit pills had been seized. National headlines spoke of record-breaking seizures, but behind those numbers lay something deeper, an intelligence network recalibrated for a new kind of warfare. With the cartel now officially listed as a foreign terrorist organization FTO, the entire legal landscape shifted. That single declaration signed under President Trump's directive unlocked counterterrorism protocols that once applied only to Al-Qaeda or ISIS. Surveillance budgets expanded. Treasury sanctions froze assets tied to CJNG's fuel theft and real estate fronts. What had begun as a narcotics probe evolved into a campaign of economic warfare. Strategically, this was more than law enforcement, it was deterrence through pressure. By striking at CJNG's financial arteries, the United States turned seizures into sanctions and raids into systemic breakdowns. The move echoed Trump's broader security posture, economic strangulation before open conflict. Analysts from Reuters and Defense News reported that the DEA's coordination pattern mirrored joint military exercises, precision-timed, intelligence-driven, and multi-front. But this wasn't just about cocaine or methamphetamine. It was about control. Every kilogram seized was a message to Mexico's rival cartels, to Beijing's chemical suppliers, and to Washington's critics abroad. America was flexing its intelligence muscle again, using domestic law as a global weapon. Around the same time, BBC coverage highlighted how the crackdown coincided with Ukraine's escalation of deep drone strikes against Russian infrastructure and Israel's retaliatory campaigns in Gaza and Syria. The parallels were striking, each front defined by hybrid warfare where civilian surveillance and rapid response teams blurred the line between military and law enforcement. In the background, CJNG convoys moved through Michoacan's back roads, armored vehicles mounted with belt-fed guns, their operators recording every move for intimidation. But inside the United States, the cartel's image of power began to crumble. Reports from The Guardian confirmed coordinated treasury hits on CJNG-linked transport firms, while DW noted a surge in arrests across Europe linked to cartel-linked money laundering. The net was global and tightening. Yet even as America celebrated the numbers, a deeper question remained. Could such aggressive coordination between intelligence, law enforcement, and civilians sustain itself without crossing constitutional boundaries? Or had the United States in its war on the cartels begun to test the very limits of liberty it swore to protect? It began with suspicion, not confrontation. A neighbor noticing the same car parked outside an apartment every Thursday at 2 a.m., a retired teacher logging license plates that didn't belong, a drone hobbyist mapping dump runs from unmarked vans. These weren't vigilantes with rifles or badges, these were citizens who decided that silence was no longer an option. In 2025, Colorado's civilian surveillance blueprint became a case study in controlled resistance. Instead of storming doors, they collected patterns, delivery times, vehicle descriptions, timestamps, and footage. Each observation formed a thread, and when woven together, those threads became probable cause. Reuters later revealed that federal analysts called this pattern package intelligence, a model now taught in DEA briefings nationwide. These reports, cross-checked and anonymized, were sent to Fusion Center's Homeland Intelligence nodes built to link local police with federal operations. The process mirrored counter-terror systems used after 9/11, but this time the battlefield was domestic. CJNG's stash houses, converted garages, and pill kitchens became the new war zones of suburban America. This civilian-driven data pipeline was unprecedented. It allowed agencies to act faster, more surgically, and with fewer false positives. And it worked. Within months, several high-yield fentanyl sites across Denver and Colorado Springs were dismantled without a single shot fired. No street chases, no chaos, just calculated court-backed enforcement. The Guardian reported that agents described these submissions as gold dust. Every verified timestamp meant fewer dead ends. Every recorded delivery meant a shorter paper trail. But what made this legal? The key was restraint. Citizens never entered private property, never interfered with operations. They stayed behind the line just far enough to see record and report. Strategically, this was revolutionary. In an era when cyber and hybrid warfare dominate global strategy, Colorado had created a model of asymmetric domestic defense. The same logic Ukraine applies on the battlefield, low-cost observation, high-yield intelligence, was now guiding America's fight against its own internal enemies. DW analysts even drew parallels to NATO's resilience doctrine, emphasizing civilian readiness as a key pillar of national security. Yet the system carried ethical shadows. Surveillance, even in the name of justice, can become invasive. Who watches the watchers when the watchers are your neighbors? What happens when suspicion becomes weaponized? Globally, parallels abound. Israel's Iron Dome intercepts rockets because its people serve as its eyes. Taiwan relies on open-source surveillance to track Chinese maritime movements. Now America's war on cartels depends on the vigilance of its own citizens. But there's a price to be paid for such awareness. Freedom and security rarely coexist peacefully. As the BBC warned in a late September analysis, the more society surveils, the less it breathes freely. In Colorado, the air feels heavier now, quieter, safer, but watched. The question remains how long before the line between protection and paranoia disappears completely. Across the border, the war looked very different. In the hills of Michoacan, gunfire echoed through villages once known for avocado farms and family markets. Now they're ghost towns, homes shattered by drone strikes, roads mined, convoys armored. CJNG's militarization wasn't a rumor anymore. It was a broadcast. Viral footage from Al Jazeera and DW showed cartel fighters rolling in armored pickup trucks fitted with steel plates, belt-fed machine guns, and surveillance drones circling overhead like vultures. This was no longer organized crime. It was an insurgency funded by narcotics, human trafficking, and now sanctioned oil theft. Reuters confirmed that the U.S. Treasury targeted multiple CJNG-linked fuel and logistics firms for siphoning Mexican crude and selling it through shell companies in Texas and California. For Washington, this wasn't just a cartel, it was a shadow state with global ambitions. Then came La Diabla. Her arrest in Ciudad Juarez sent shockwaves through both nations. The Guardian detailed how Martha Alicia La Diabla Mendez Aguilar ran an infant trafficking network luring pregnant women performing illegal surgeries and selling newborns for $14,000 apiece. When U.S. intelligence supported the Mexican operation that captured her, it confirmed one chilling reality: CJNG wasn't just dealing drugs, it was monetizing human life. Strategically, these revelations shifted Washington's tone. The Trump administration doubled down on its FTO classification, merging counterterrorism intelligence with narcotics enforcement. The National Counterterrorism Center (NCTC) began monitoring CJNG communications under frameworks once reserved for jihadist networks. Defense news analysts noted that cartel targeting now mirrored drone-led counter-terror operations from the Middle East, except this time the targets were within the Western Hemisphere. Meanwhile, far beyond the Americas, another clue emerged. Kenyan authorities dismantled a methamphetamine lab run by foreign nationals, later linked through forensic evidence to CJNG intermediaries. Reuters and BBC coverage confirmed it as the first open-source acknowledgement of a CJNG presence in East Africa, proof that the cartel's reach extended beyond the Americas. For the DEA, that was the final confirmation. CJNG was evolving into a transnational criminal terror network not unlike Hezbollah's or ISIS's economic wings. The pattern is global, as Russia bombards Ukraine with Iranian drones, as Israel faces asymmetric attacks from Hamas proxies, and as the US braces for Chinese cyber intrusions, one truth emerges: modern conflict is no longer defined by borders, it's about networks. CJNG thrives on that reality. The same encrypted channels used to smuggle drugs are now used to transfer money, launder oil profits, and recruit soldiers. Yet America's counter-strategy using sanctions intelligence and community data may be its most precise weapon yet. Still, the question lingers: can a democracy survive when its wars are fought in alleys and living rooms instead of distant deserts? And when the enemy adapts faster than the law, who adapts faster than fear? Colorado's hidden Warfront was never supposed to exist. Nestled between quiet suburbs and ski towns, it became the unlikely front line of a global narcotics empire. The first signs appeared in early 2025, nightclubs in Colorado Springs doubling as distribution hubs, private homes in Aurora retooled into pill press factories, and military-grade weapons appearing in the hands of local security guards. When DEA task forces stormed an underground club that spring, the revelation stunned investigators. Over 100 people detained, including more than a dozen active-duty U.S. service members working as armed security or off-duty patrons. BBC reports confirmed the club was a CJNG-funded safe house moving fentanyl, methamphetamine, and cocaine across state lines. What began as a nightlife raid turned into a blueprint for dismantling cartel infiltration inside America's institutions. Colorado wasn't just another trafficking route, it was a relay. Interstate highways like I-70 and I-25 served as arteries connecting Mexican supply lines to Midwestern demand. According to Reuters, over 500,000 fentanyl pills were seized in Denver's metro area this year alone, linking directly to CJNG's logistics networks. Each house raided wasn't just a lab, it was a node in a continental pipeline. This made Colorado the new proving ground for joint operations. Local detectives, federal agents, and now civilian observers formed a triangle of intelligence. The Guardian described it as community-assisted policing, a phrase that would have sounded absurd a decade ago. But in 2025, it worked. Behind the arrests and raids lay a deeper reality: CJNG had grown too big to hide. Its operations intersected with U.S. financial systems, military circles, and immigrant communities. And for the first time, the cartel's infrastructure inside the United States mirrored the complexity of its networks in Mexico, compartmentalized, encrypted, and self-sustaining. DW reported that after the Colorado raids, the U.S. Treasury froze assets linked to real estate and hospitality fronts used for laundering money through rental properties. That financial chokehold, combined with the DEA's tactical raids, crippled the cartel's mid-tier management, forcing a retreat deeper underground. Globally, this pattern echoed other proxy wars. In Ukraine, small reconnaissance units have become the eyes of a nation defending against invasion. In Israel, Shin Bet has used neighborhood informants to preempt rocket cells. Now, the US mirrored these models not against foreign armies, but against an enemy embedded within its borders. The human toll, however, is undeniable. Colorado's overdose deaths remain among the highest in the country. Families who once feared cartel violence in headlines now find it on their doorstep. Neighborhoods are safer but more paranoid. Children learn to recognize pill logos before they learn state capitals. The fight for Colorado's security is no longer fought overseas, it's fought on driveways at gas stations and in school parking lots. So here's the question that echoes across every front line from Kyiv to Colorado. How far can a free nation go to stay safe before it starts resembling the enemies it fights? The dust had barely settled when the strategy evolved. What began as a Colorado experiment became a national template. By late October 2025, multiple states, Arizona, Nevada, and Texas had quietly launched pilot programs modeled on Colorado's civilian coordination system. Local tip lines were now wired directly into federal fusion centers, and the Department of Justice confirmed a unified database connecting vigilante logs with DEA warrants. President Trump praised the model in a televised address, calling it a victory for American resilience and a warning to every foreign syndicate hiding behind our borders. Within hours, new sanctions hit CJNG's offshore fronts in Belize and Panama. The U.S. Treasury, as reported by Reuters and DW, froze over $180 million linked to logistics firms that finance cartel gunmen and smuggling networks. America had turned financial warfare into a precision tool, one that didn't need bombs to destroy empires. The scale of coordination was staggering. Defense News reported that the DEA's 2025 dual surge targeting Sinaloa first, then CJNG weeks later wasn't coincidence. It was synchronized disruption, paralyzing both cartels' supply lines simultaneously to spike street prices and drain liquidity. The results: meth and fentanyl prices surged 40% across US markets. Cartel profits plunged. But behind the victory, deeper strategy emerged. America's war on cartels wasn't just about narcotics, it was about global credibility. As Trump's administration clashed diplomatically with China over synthetic precursor chemicals, the CJNG takedown sent a message to Beijing the United States could strike economic enemies without firing a shot. It also reinforced America's stance amid global crises, from Ukraine's defense against Russian drones to Israel's counterstrikes in the Middle East, showing that the West could still coordinate rapid, multi-front responses. Yet beneath the triumph, the societal cost grows. The Guardian reported rising tension between privacy advocates and federal agencies. Critics warned that neighborhood surveillance risks, creating a civilian intelligence state where citizens trade privacy for safety. Others called it a necessary evolution, an echo of Cold War vigilance updated for a digital age. And then there's the human dimension. For the families of Colorado, victory comes with silence. Streets are cleaner, yes, but quieter in a way that feels unnatural. Empty homes where labs once buzzed now stand boarded, marked by red hazard tape. Children cycle past them without knowing the battles fought within. The war feels won, but never really over. Because as history shows, when one network collapses, another waits to rise. Across the Rio Grande, new factions already recruit, promising to reclaim lost American ground. In Nairobi and Panama and Guadalajara, whispers of CJNG's return flicker like embers refusing to die. America's next test isn't whether it can fight back, it's whether it can stay vigilant without losing the values it fights for. Can freedom and surveillance coexist? Can unity survive in a nation that now watches itself? The battle for Colorado proved one truth: the future of warfare isn't fought with tanks or missiles, it's fought with information, timing, and trust. And the question that remains is simple but haunting: who will America become when its greatest defense is its own reflection? In 2025, the US confronted a new kind of enemy. The Jalisco New Generation Cartel, now officially labeled a foreign terrorist organization, found its empire collapsing under a blend of federal precision and civilian vigilance. From the mountains of Colorado to the fields of Michoacan, the battle blurred the boundaries between national security and domestic resilience. Colorado's citizens, armed not with guns but with cameras, created a blueprint for asymmetric defense, proving that intelligence, not firepower, defines modern warfare. President Trump's administration expanded that model nationwide, merging economic sanctions, data surveillance, and cross-agency coordination into an invisible strike force. Yet victory carries a shadow. The same surveillance that dismantled cartels now tests America's balance between liberty and control. As CJNG fragments and regroups across continents, one question endures: can the United States preserve its freedom while fighting enemies who thrive in its blind spots? The war isn't over, it has only changed shape, and its next front may not be across the border, but within the walls of every community still watching, waiting, and recording.